Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Journey to Legacy podcast. I am your host, Wayne Veldsman. Today I have a special interview for you all. Miss Debbie Woods of Into the Woods Coaching and Narcissism Survival Coaching Institute. Miss Debbie has a pretty interesting story actually, from how she went sort of the traditional route of college and med school and ended up getting married and being a full-time mom, but figuring out that she wasn't being supported. She was actually in a pretty detrimental relationship to her health that led to a near-death experience. Debbie in this interview talks us through it and actually provides actionable advice on how all of our listeners can start to think about their own life, can start to dissect what's going on and maybe ask themselves some key questions of, do they need to make change happen? And actually how they can make that change happen before a near-death experience like what happened to Debbie would happen to you. So thank you for being here so much. If you like the episode, please subscribe, share it as well. Thanks again. Let's go ahead and jump right on in. Debbie, hey, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Yes. So nice to have you. I've been looking forward to it, honestly. Debbie, kick us off. Just tell all of our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a coach for people who have survived from narcissism and have gone beyond that, stepped out of that line of living and stepped into that place where we're leaving that behind and we're stepping into our empowerment. And how do we want to live our life going forward? How do we want to be empowered, step into our fullness and really become a fully empowered person? So I help women, men too, if they want to work with me, find their pathway forward after they've left their narcissist and feel empowered in their life.
Wonderful. You are a experienced, wise lady that, like you said, went through a narcissistic relationship yourself, and now you're helping others to sort of navigate through them as well, right? Mm-hmm. We'll touch on it more a little bit later, but tell us a little bit just like where that pivot happened. What was the situation you were in and how'd you get through it?
Well, the pivot for me initially happened when I realized my ex-husband came to me and told me he'd had yet another affair. And, I said, okay, I've got to leave this. And then as I was journeying through the divorce phase, and all the stress and had another relationship fail after that, I ended up having a near-death event, a stroke from all the stress of all of the past that I had put myself under. And in the wake of that, I said to myself, you cannot continue to burden your life with all of this woeful pity me. I'm so put upon. This is everybody else's fault. And it was at the end of the day, the stress that you put your body under, the stress from your lack of forgiveness, the stress, it literally killed me, right? And so you have to do something different. And so out of that, I came into a spiritual recovery time for myself, self-healing, worked on all kinds of different avenues for that. And at the end of the day, said, look, it's time to take what I've done, because I feel like I'm in an incredibly stable, holistic space now where I can say to other people, come along on the journey. Let me help you pull yourself up, because it's certainly not an easy path. And there were many people along the way who helped me. So it's time to turn around and help other people. And so that would be the, kind of like two pivotal spaces, if you will.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. Wow. Going through that divorce, right, because of unfaithfulness, unfortunately, it sounds like it happened multiple times. So that sort of pushed you to realize I need to move on. But then at the same time, like you said, this near death, a stroke event happened.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I mean, it makes me think and wonder about how people can realize that they're in such a situation before they get to a near-death experience. Looking back, do you think that there are maybe some signs you could share or ways that you were feeling that could help listeners think to themselves, this is somewhat a situation that I'm in. I need to maybe make change before a near death experience happens myself?
Absolutely. I mean, you can look at, from the divorce, well, even before the divorce, you can look at places where you are giving your power away to other people. Where am
Mm,
I, where am I saying I am not enough? Where am I saying other people will take precedence over me? And unfortunately, in our society, we do a lot of putting other people first, because we tend to say, if I put myself first, it's selfish. It's selfish, right? Oh, it's so selfish of you. You should put this person first or that person. And especially as a mom or a dad, you're compelled to put everybody else first. The
yes.
reality of that is, if you're putting everybody else first and nobody's pouring into you, you are pouring from an empty cup. We hear that comment everywhere
Mm,
we go,
mm,
right?
mm,
And so it's not selfish. It's not selfish to set appropriate boundaries and guardrails for your own sanity, your own self, to say, okay, this is my time, this is my space, whatever it is. Different people do different things, whether you like to meditate, whether you like to garden, whether it's your time at the gym, whatever it is, you need to make that time for yourself so that you can feel like, and I am filling myself up. Here's a classic example. I actually lost this friend as a result, but she and I had some really great conversations around self love.
mm.
And I use this, I'm not a religious person. I grew up from religion. And so I tend to be very standoffish on a lot of things, but there are some golden jewels in the Bible that I grew up, learning
Mm.
from. And one of them is this passage, the what is love? Love is kind and patient and so on and so forth, right? In fact, I'm writing a book about radical love, and I use that as part of my
Oh,
context.
wonderful.
Um,
Love that.
and so I told her, she said, "Oh yes, I love myself. I love myself. Of course I do. I do. I do." And then she goes, "I'm just so stupid about blah blah blah." And I said,
Mm,
"Lahu, time out."
yeah.
And she said, "What?" And I said, "How can you sit here and tell me you love yourself, and then in the next phrase say, I'm so stupid? I
Uh,
don't get what you're saying, Deb." And I said,
mm, mm,
"Love is kind.
yeah.
How were you kind to yourself by telling yourself you're stupid?" And so those are the kind of things that when I'm coaching a person, I'm like, are you being kind to yourself? And so sometimes we take this word, I love myself, but
Mm,
you're self-deprecating.
sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so it's something so simple as that. And we can do it to ourselves, and we can say, well, I'm putting all these little sticky notes to say, oh, tell yourself you love yourself, tell yourself this, tell yourself that. But then you forget when you look in the mirror and say, oh, I look so fat in this dress, or oh, my hair is so stupid, or oh, whatever you're telling,
Wow.
take that one thing and go through the whole week and say, this week I will be kind to myself.
Mm,
This week I will be patient. Or at the end of the day, how was I unkind to myself? Or at the end of the day,
mm,
how was I impatient with myself? Right? Simple things like
nice.
that. So those are some of the things that we talk through, and it's really been very, very, very impactful.
I love that. Oh, there's so much to unpack there, honestly. But I really enjoy the piece of the self-reflection at the end of the day, truly. Right? That's something
Right,
simple, as you said, simple things that when you're going to sleep, maybe have a couple words there, right? Let's just use love and kindness and patience here, right? For the example. Before you go to sleep, today you ask, how did I love myself? How could I love myself more? Right?
right.
How was I patient with myself today? How could I have been more patient? Or what when I was I not? Same with kind to yourself. Keep it so simple. And so it sounds like sort of the answer, right? That I asked for people that need to realize this before they reach that near death experience themselves is to think, am I having thoughts around I'm not enough? am I constantly just putting others before myself, causing me to try and fill others' cup from an essentially empty cup? And then there's that self-deprecating piece, putting yourself down also. Is that right?
Right. Yep, absolutely. Those kind of things are going to precede that. And at some point you're empty. Your body becomes ill and you then become, as they would say in holistic medicine, diseased, as opposed to diseased. And suddenly your body is going, the body keeps the score. There's a book out there. It's a great book. The body keeps the score. And the body sometime eventually is going to come up for air and say, enough.
Well, you also started talking about selfishness, which is interesting because I've been thinking about this topic for a past little while now, that we were taught inappropriately what it is to be selfish. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you define that, how you think about it for yourself?
I think for myself, something is selfish if I'm doing it for my own personal gain to harm another.
To harm another.
If there's harm to another person, right? I want to take from you for my own personal gain. That's a problem, right?
Gotcha.
If I am setting this boundary that says I need this time this evening for, let's say it's a meditation time. I spend 20 minutes before I go to bed, and then my daughter, who doesn't live with me, calls me up and says, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z for me because da 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 da. That no, it's a no,
Sure.
right? Sure. If on the other hand, and then if she comes at me with, oh, and she throws some kind of, well, that's selfish on her part because she wants to take from me that which is not available for her own purposes. Sure. Now, the other part of that is, obviously, we have to be balanced in these kind of things, because if she's, she's fallen down and injured herself and she needs a ride to the emergency room, and that would be clearly selfish of me to say, I can't help you get to the emergency room. I have to go meditate. My ums are more important than
of course,
than your health, right? That would be selfish. So you balance it in that way. Would it be wrong and self-seeking of me to not help another person who's in physical harm if I didn't sacrifice, if you will, my time, personal time, to go help them? That would be selfish at that point. So there's a line, but
there's a line.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It can be different for each individual also. Right. Just, I think our whole lives, the majority of us were taught, don't be selfish, right? Put others before yourself, which overarching, sure, it's a great idea, great concept, right? Be giving. I highly believe in the more you give, the more you'll receive.
Right.
However, if you don't take care of yourself, right, then you're not going to be able to take care of others. So I like that perspective of it's harming others is a great way to think about that when you're being selfish.
Right. Well, and typically, if you think about it, it's true. The more you give, the more you receive. However, at the same time, you do have to be judicious, because very often others, we can get into that catch-22, and I find myself in that very often, where others are never going to behave the way you will behave.
Sure.
And if you're a very altruistic individual, you can find yourself in that space where you're like, but I would always give. Why aren't you giving to me? And then suddenly you can find resentment setting in. And so if you find resentment setting in, then it's time to check your boundaries. Are you being too porous, right?
Sure. Yeah. And, piece that also goes towards like your expectation. Like, oh,
Right,
I expect people to act like I do. And
right,
it's a recipe for failure. But
right.
Debbie, let's rewind a little bit because obviously right now, and we'll talk about it here soon, you're running multiple coaching businesses, right? You're helping people get through this serious trauma that can happen in their life, situations that you went through as well. Rewind us back a little bit before that, because I think it's very interesting for people to hear about each other's journeys. Because it's easy for us to just think, oh man, she's always been this way. Like, oh man, she was an entrepreneur from birth. I can't do that. Tell us a little bit more about sort of your journey leading up to where you are today.
Sure, sure. Well, out of high school, I had the vision of being a physician. So I was headed to out of college. I was 1 year short of going to med school. And then typical for some of us at my age, I met a guy and you know the story from there. Met a guy and then you get married and suddenly all their priorities take priority. And we
Interesting.
moved from, I grew up in, my dad was military. So, but we landed in Denver and that was home. And so I met him, we got married, we went to New York City and we were there chasing his career. And then we went to California, chasing his career, had kids, came to Kansas City, which is where I live now, chasing his career. And all the while, I have these 3 young children and my now ex-husband was a chronic cheater. And
Wow.
for whatever reason in my mind, I could separate these business trip flings from affairs.
Interesting.
However, I don't know, but I did. When we got to Kansas City, it was an affair. And so I was like, oh, that's different. Now you've given emotions away. And somehow that
It
was
was
different in my mind. So
it was local. Now it's local,
it
so
was
that
different. It
makes
was
a big
different.
difference.
So
Sure.
I, I had to make different decisions at that point.
Mm.
But the reality was in that moment, I had to say, okay, wait a minute. You have put all of your dreams, you have put all of, not that being a mother and have a wife and doing those things to the best of my ability wasn't also a dream, but I had
Sure.
dreams of a career and being, an excellent physician. And, my
Mm.
ultimate dream was to be this, neonatologist and take care of, things that be this expert in the field. And that was set aside to chase someone else's dreams. Again, chasing someone else's dreams, doing for everybody else. And so as a mother and wife, I was doing for everybody else, doing for everybody else. And meanwhile, everybody was take, right?
Sure.
So I had to face the reality at that point, that nobody's going to take care of you unless you step into that place. There was a lot of bitterness to overcome, as with anyone who's dealt with a narcissist can tell you. My ex-husband was a narcissist. He still is today. It's very difficult to go through that journey because you deal with a lot of anger, a lot of vindictiveness, a lot of bitterness, a lot of why me, a lot of it's a big ugly suitcase full of nasty. And overcoming all of that is a difficult journey. It's a difficult journey as a single mom with 3 children. You have to get them raised. I never finished my bachelor's degree. My youngest son, my middle son, when he got his driver's license, I had been taxi cab mom. I will tell you, I went to school and I'm going to finish my bachelor's degree. And they said, okay, well, it'll probably take you about 3 years to do 1 year of college, right?
Oh wow.
I said, oh no, I have been taxi cab mom. I did the 1 year in 1 year and it was easier than the taxi cab mom thing, right? So they were amazed. And then I did my master's and I have a second master's now and I'm a doctoral candidate.
Wow.
So it's not difficult, but it was an amazing journey for me because I knew I had all of this within me, but I was giving all my power away to somebody
Wow.
else. So it's been an amazing journey. but it was all stymied by supporting
Sure.
someone else, right?
Sure.
And it's probably
Mm,
true for many of your listeners too. How
mm,
much am I giving away to someone else? And so it's a good thing to sit back and think, if you're feeling all of those things we talked about earlier,
yeah,
when is it time? When is it their time? When is it your time? When is it
sure.
your time to step into your space, right?
Sure. Wow. So, yeah, went from military family, college, you were headed to med school. And of course, still part of an amazing journey. You found someone you love, married, kids,
Mhm.
full-time mom, absolutely amazing. And then you made this huge, huge pivot. Real quick, I have a follow-up question, but could you just define narcissism for us? Or what are some narcissistic behaviors that people could be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. There are about 10 things that you can look for in a narcissist. However, just to be clear, we throw that term around like it's,
Sure,
candy in
it's
a
that good.
jar these
Yep.
days. And you really need to be careful, because to actually be a narcissist, somebody really needs to exhibit 5 of these behaviors consistently for 6 months.
Mm,
But you're looking for this grandiose behavior, this entitlement, these individuals who have this lack of empathy. They
mm,
don't they never are wrong.
mm,
They can't connect with your emotions, right? They um, they tend to think that the whole world revolves around them.
mm.
It
Sure.
was created for me.
Sure.
and and they don't they have this complete inability to connect with that they could ever be at fault for anything. And if you bring something up, they're going to say, well, gosh, I'm really sorry that that happened, but here's how it's your problem.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
on. And so those are
I'm
some
with
of
you
the
now.
things you're looking for.
Okay.
In the worst case scenarios, they can get incredibly volatile and violent, but many times what we're dealing with are people who are more covert narcissists.
Okay.
I've come to realize over time, my mom is honestly one of my narcissists, and it's been a difficult thing, almost heartrending for me to even admit that, because she's so
Sure.
wounded herself. She is
Yeah.
clueless that she
Doesn't even
behaves in
realize.
any way like that. Um, and so
Okay.
there will never be an apology for me. There will never be any, and I don't want it, to be frankly honest with
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Well, so that makes a lot of sense. And
you.
so, Debbie, and this might have to do a lot with your coaching here, right? I'm curious that you found yourself in this situation, right? Near death experience, all this narcissistic behavior. I'm curious how you got through it, how you sort of started to heal, and ideally maybe some actionable stuff that our listeners could think through and implement themselves. Like I said, maybe this is part of sort of the coaching, how you do it.
Mhm. Well, part of the thing I do in my coaching is I really start to talk to people and work with them. What is it they're looking for? What is it? And it's going to be different for every person. What is it
Mm,
you need? Um, and at the end of the day, we need to look within. We need to look inside. Um, and what we're all looking for is love, right? At the end of
mm,
the day, the very bottom line is we're looking for love. We're looking to to find that space where we feel loved. Um, and you're going to get it most from yourself. And that's the hardest battle. That's the hardest battle to climb through. And for me, I think that was my hardest battle, was that self-doubt, not believing in yourself, not trusting yourself, not trusting your gut instinct, not feeling confident to step out there on your own, feeling that need another person,
mm.
and all of that. And when you climb through all of that, then you realize, oh, I am enough just as I am.
Sure. Sure. So
And
how did you personally climb through all that? I mean, it's a lot. You don't think you're
it's a
enough,
lot.
confidence lacking.
Yeah.
How did you do it?
Um, I did a lot of internal meditation
Okay.
work. meditation works different for different people. It's a lot of thought work. I read a lot of self-help books. I'm a very self-motivated person. I did a lot of journaling, a lot of introspection. I worked with in some cases, I didn't do a long-term therapy work, but I worked with some professional therapists. There's a lot of conversation with other people where you are empowered to hear the words, "You are correct." You are correct. And to have another person in your life who just affirms you, to be affirmed, to be heard, to be seen. Those are things that are important. And so I think that's probably the most thing. And that's probably the biggest reason why I choose the path of being the coach, is to say to others like myself, you are correct. You're correct. You're correct. You don't have to do it the way everybody else does it either. And so that's an important thing.
Nice. It's almost just getting a lot of what you were missing, right? What was being taken from you. Right. I love those pieces of the tons of introspection, right? Good for you for, being self-motivated and reading. And then I like the journaling piece as well, right? Just like getting your thoughts out and understanding it. I personally like to talk to myself in the car. And people think that this is sort of like, crazy people talk to themselves. And call me crazy if you want to, but it's almost like my form of journaling. It's like, I'm going to just talk it out. Because then you hear it to yourself, and you can almost tell yourself, you are correct, right? I hear myself. I see myself. This is a sane way of thinking. Yes. And so it's similar to journaling is how I like to think about it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's nice. So Debbie,
I was going to say a lot comes through in the journaling. And so whether a person believes in God as God, or a higher self, or their higher self, or whatever, however you frame it up, it's this idea that there is something outside. There's a book, oh gosh, Michael Singer talks about the consciousness, right? This voice outside of yourself, that whether you call it God, whether you call it your angels, whether you call it your spirit guides, it's almost irrelevant. Label it however you want to label it, right? It's that voice outside of yourself that's saying correct, or that voice outside of yourself that says, do you really think we should be doing this? And you really should start listening to it, because it's your conscience that's saying, yeesh, I don't think this is a good idea, or that's saying, oh yes, this is exactly the way we're going to go, right? So I don't know.
Good way to think about it.
It's that intuition. Many people call it your intuition. I think you label it whatever your soul is good with labeling it, and you go with it.
And go with it. Listen to it. Absolutely listen to it. It's the key. Absolutely. So Debbie, as we wind up, we only have about a minute left, but I always like to ask people about legacy. And so to you, I'm curious, one, what does legacy mean? And what's the legacy that you're working to leave on this world?
I think the legacy means, when I'm gone, how will they remember me? What is that phrase, that sentence, that commentary that everybody's going to say, oh, I remember how this about Deb, right? And the thing for me is, I want people to think of me as that change maker, that person who said, I don't really care if people like it or not. I will be the change maker. I will stand for change. And that's how I want to be remembered.
And that's a wrap. Miss Debbie Woods of Into the Woods Coaching and Narcissism Survival Coaching Institute. What did you all think about that? Man, my biggest takeaway here is to just start to think to yourself, whether it's talking to yourself, whether it's journaling, am I busy pitying myself? Am I asking others to pity me? Am I thinking about I'm not enough? Am I putting other people too much before myself? Am I being self-deprecating, or am I putting myself down? we can think through that, we can pretty quickly start to realize that I'm not filling my own cup up enough. I'm not loving myself. I'm not being kind to myself. So I invite all of you, take some action on that today. Take some action on that this week. If you need help with it, we're busy building an amazing place just for you. Come check out the Journey to Legacy community. It's a place where growth-oriented individuals are all coming together to better themselves, to better each other, and through that, better the world. That's the impact, the legacy that we are working to leave. Come find us over at journeytolegacy.org. Until next time, thank you so much for being here. Please subscribe, share the episode, and I will catch you next time on the Journey to Legacy podcast.